So the first plenary is entitled Reflecting on 50 Years of Modern Treaties, Where We Came From, Where We Are Going. So it seems very appropriate to start off with that. I want to take the moment to recognize the sponsor for this plenary, OKT Law. Thank you very much. And for this plenary, I have the unenviable task, I think that's the right word, right, of making sure that speakers know when it's 3 minutes, 1 minute, and then time's up. But I'm really hoping that speakers will stick to the time allotted, because we know, particularly I think as Indigenous peoples, maybe I'm stereotyping, we don't like conflict. So anyway, so I'm going to call upon Chief Luis Natawapio and Deputy Chief Nathan Uniam from Nescapi to come up, please.
Wachia Luis Natapio, Disney Hajon, Scapi, Iojmasko, Dakawachmach. Good morning, my name is Louise. I am Chief of the Nescapi Nation of Kawachmas. I would like to recognize that we are meeting on an unceded Anishinaabe, Algonquin territory. It is an honor for me to be here today as we reflect on 50 years of modern treaties in Canada. While we recognize this milestone, we also take this moment to reflect on our struggles, honor our resilience, and reaffirm the path we continue to walk towards self-determination. Today, Deputy Chief Nathan Unim and I would like to share some of the history of our people and our nation's efforts to shape a better future for our present and future generations. I will begin by talking about the history of our people, the Nescapi people. History is not just something that happened. It is something very sincere we carry in our language, in our stories and legends, in our connection to the land, in our struggles, and in our survival. For generations, the Nescapi were nomadic and followed the caribou herds from the Hudson Bay in the west to the Labrador coast in the east, and from the Angava Bay in the north to the vicinity of what is now known as Labrador City in the south. For centuries, we moved with the caribou, following the herds across the vast tundra and taiga of what is now called Quebec and Labrador. We refer to our traditional territory as Nojimiusi, which means the territory where we hunt. Caribou was and always will be more than sustenance for the Nescapi. It is a central part of our identity. Every part of the caribou is used. Nothing is wasted. Our ancestors lived by the laws of the land, laws of balance and respect, never taking more than was needed. But in time, outside forces imposed a different kind of law, one that sought to control the land rather than live with it. For centuries, our people moved freely, living in small independent groups, coming together during peak caribou seasons, trading at places like Fort Nascopi, Fort Chimo, and Fort Mackenzie. Our traditions were passed down through stories, the Bajmuna, our true histories, and Adiuhin, our sacred legends. These stories were more than words. They were our maps, our teachings, our connection to the past. We were a people of the land until the land was taken from us. Colonial powers, first through the fur trade, then through mining and hydroelectric development, saw our land as a home, not as a home, but as a resource to be exploited. In 1831, the Hudson's Bay Company set up a trading post at Fort Chimo, It was the beginning of forced dependence on European goods, the introduction of disease, and the disruption of our way of life. As our people shifted to meet the growing demands of the fur trade, food became scarce, leading to mass starvation that claimed nearly half of the Naskapi population. In the early 1900s, our ancestors were relocated again and again, from Fort Nascopi to Fort McKenzie, from Fort McKenzie to Fort Chimo, not for our benefit, for the convenience of fur traders and settlers. By the mid-1900s, our traditional life was becoming impossible. The caribou herds we depended on were disappearing. And with the rise of industrial development, we were being pushed aside, assimilated, forgotten. Finally, in 1956, our people were forced to relocate from Fort Chimo, known today as Kuujjuaq, to Schefferville, a mining town built on our ancestral land, without our consent. It was a journey of hardship. Our people walked for miles. Many fell ill, and some never made it. When we arrived there were no homes waiting for us, no schools for our children, no health care, no support for our people. Our forced relocation reminds me of the Trail of Tears, another chapter of Indigenous displacement and suffering. While our experiences were different, the pain of losing our land, our way of life, and our people is a struggle we share. The weight of that journey still weighs heavy on our Naskapi nation today. In 1978, we entered into the Northeastern Quebec Agreement, the NICA, with the government of Quebec and Canada, and others joining the Cree and Inuit under the James Bay and Northern Quebec Agreement, the JBNQA. These agreements were the first modern treaties in Canada, and they reshaped the relationship between Indigenous nations, Quebec and Canada. The provisions in the JBNQA and the NEQA are mandatory and binding on Quebec and Canada, and the rights granted by both treaties to the Naskapis provide constitutional protection. The NEQA was negotiated under immense pressure in a landscape where the balance of power was entirely uneven. The governments came to the table with all the power, and we, a small nation, less than 300 members, were facing the risk of losing our lands entirely without recognition or compensation. In exchange for rights and resources, we were forced to surrender our claims, titles, and interests to vast ancestral lands that had sustained our people for generations. The NEQA is also vast, complex, and difficult to fully grasp, even today, let alone at a time when our people were navigating a system built without them in a language and legal framework unfamiliar to many. Despite the circumstances that surround the negotiating process, the NEQA gave the Naskapi something invaluable, a voice. At a time, we were one of the smallest Indigenous communities in Quebec and Canada. We could have been forgotten or left aside without recognition. Without the NEQA, our voice would have been far weaker, perhaps silenced entirely. Our place at the negotiating tables would have been uncertain, if we had a place at all. Instead, the NEQA ensured that we were recognized as a distinct nation with the right to advocate for our interests, negotiate on our own behalf, and to shape our future rather than having it dictated to us. We recognize the strength and determination of our ancestors, who, despite overwhelming odds, ensured that the Naskapi Nation was not only acknowledged, but had a framework to govern itself and fight for its future generations. The NEQA also placed key responsibility back into the hands of the Naskapi. It laid the foundation for Naskapi self-governments, giving our elected council, not distant government officials, the power to oversee health, education, and social services and economic development in Kawawachimach. With this came great financial autonomy, long-term funding agreements, and the ability to determine our own path, not as subjects of the Indian Act, but as a nation responsible for itself. In 1983, we built Kawawachimach, a community 12 kilometers northeast of Shefferville, one that stands today as a testament to our resilience. Kawawachimach is the only Naskapi community. In 1999, we officially became the Naskapi Nation of Kawawachimach, asserting our identity and governance. And so, as we mark 50 years of modern treaties, we ask, where do we go from here?
Ocha, Nini Hadagon, Nathan Union. Ocha, good morning. Hello. My name is Nathan Union. I am the Deputy Chief of my community of Kawawachimach, Naskapi First Nation. As our Chief Natopio has mentioned, our people have endured one thing after another over the last 200 years. Despite the hardships that have befallen us, one thing has never changed. Our nation has always been self-governing. Long before colonial laws, before treaties, we made our own decisions. We led our own people, and we shaped our own future. Today, we are negotiating to affirm what we already know, that the Naskapi Nation is a self-governing nation, and that we have the right to make a decision about our land, our identity, and most importantly, our future. But this time, unlike in 1978, when the Northeastern Quebec Agreement was signed, we will be doing it on our own terms. Our nation is currently advancing its constitution, written by Naskapis for the Naskapis. At the same time, we are negotiating with the Government of Canada to secure greater self-governing powers, powers that go beyond what Canada was willing to recognize over 50 years ago. For too long, the policies that governed us were created without us. We cannot undo the past, but as we stand today, we can refuse to let history repeat itself. Governance alone is not enough. Self-government means nothing if our people are still struggling. We must confront the challenges our nation faces today and build solutions that reflect our values, our priorities, and our vision for the future generations to come. Many issues plague each community, and ours is not any different. We have issues when it comes to housing, mental health and addiction, land rights, infrastructure deficits, self-governance development, and most importantly, preserving our identity, our language, and our culture. Each of these challenges is a barrier to our self-determination. A strong self-government is not just about political recognition, it is about giving people, our people, the power to build a future that reflects who we are. 50 years ago, modern treaties changed the legal landscape of Canada, but they did not change who we are as a nation. We call them modern treaties, but after 50 years, can they really be defined as modern? The modern treaties of yesterday are becoming historic treaties of tomorrow. And like all histories, they risk being frozen in time if they are not allowed to grow. Treaties are living agreements meant to expand and progress alongside the people they are made with. A treaty is not just a resolution of a dispute, it is the foundation of a relationship. And like any relationship, it must be nurtured, protected, and above all, made to evolve. Today, we call on all governments to respect and uphold Indigenous self-determination, not just in policy, but also in practice. For too long, our people have been told where to live, how to work, and what to give up in exchange for survival. But survival is not enough. We are here to thrive, as all nations must. We shall protect our land, we shall reclaim our language, and we will heal our people. To our elders, to our future leaders, and our youth, we are the Naskapi Nation. We were here long before the treaties were ever made, and we'll be here long after. Now, I want to thank you all, and I want to say thank you to those who have come before us, our previous leaders. Thank you very much. Now.
Kuya Namig, thank you. I'm now going to be calling upon Dave Joe, who will be joining us.
Good morning. Now, whose idea was it to hold a land claims conference next door to a casino? It's almost like staying next door to the tax man. You don't know what the tax rate is going to be tonight or tomorrow, or indeed, if you're lucky, to get a refund. So a bit about my background. I'm a citizen of Champagne-Ajac First Nation, and we are not schizoid, but I live in a territory which, in the Yukon, we do have settled final agreements and agreements in self-government, but in the territory in BC, in which my people occupy as well, we have unceded territory. So we live in a territory, half of which I guess you could say is ceded, pursuant to the terms of a modern treaty, and the other half is like we've always owned and used, subject, of course, to the evolving common laws. So in terms of my background, I'm a member of the Wolf Clan of Champagne-Ajac, and it's great. And indeed, I am an elder now. And I say that with pride. I look at some folks here who I've known over the last 50 years. It's been a long, enduring, trying process, but we survive, people. We are here. And not survived, we have thrived. In terms of my background, of course, I'm a survivor, as they call it, of residential school. I did my time there. I've spent 11 years in those lovely facilities that are still, by the way, part of the statutory law of Canada under the Indian Act for all Indian children to attend school between the ages of 7 and 16, but it's not enforced now. In that context, I certainly have done my time. I did attend UVic, in which I met some great friends there at UVic, like Bill Wilson, who has recently passed from BC, and had a great friendship with him and knew him a long time, and went to law school with Bill as well. He was in third year, I was in first year, so I certainly learned a lot from him as well. So I did graduate from law school in 1976 and effectively have been working on behalf of Yukon First Nations and certainly Champagne-Atiac for the last, over 50 plus years now. And it's been a very enjoyable experience for me. In 1973, of course, on Valentine's Day, 1973, about 2 weeks after the Supreme Court of Canada had ruled on the Nisga'a case, and that Supreme Court decision, I think, opened the door for modern treaties, because the Supreme Court of Canada had agreed that the concept of Aboriginal title existed. The only issue for the Nisga'a back then was whether or not their title had been extinguished, either expressly or implicitly by the Crown. And so 2 weeks later, when the Yukon Chiefs came down, we basically said, instead of us going to court, like the Nisga'a just did, let's sit down and let's negotiate a modern treaty or a comprehensive treaty. And so Canada then agreed. That was in 1973. So let me talk about what I consider to be some of the successes of our modern treaty, which for Champagne-Atiac at least, has been in place since 1995. So it's about, according to my mission school math, about 30 years old as I speak. So I think one of the successes, in my view, is the abiding relationship that we have with our treaty partners, both Yukon and with Canada. I think we've had a fairly effective and long-term and constructive relationships with both Crown partners. And we also, as a result of that, we tried unsuccessfully in 1984 to adopt one treaty for the entire Yukon. That was rejected by the chiefs back then, simply because they all wanted their own unique treaty. So we did adopt a common type of formula, a common type of concepts that applied throughout the Yukon territory, and we built a framework on which they could develop their own modern treaties. And that was consented to by them. So currently now we have final agreements that are designed and implemented by them against a common constitutional backdrop. And so we also have agreements on self-government, which currently we have 14 Yukon First Nations in the Yukon. 11 of them have agreements on self-government. We've also, the other success that I think we've retained, we were the first modern treaty to retain Aboriginal title to our treaty lands. All of the other treaties had ceded, surrendered, released, and extinguished their title. And one of the concepts that was rejected early on was that if we are to do a treaty, we do not want to surrender our title. So the form of tenure that we currently have in terms of the retention of our title is that in my case, for example, we do have Champagne-Atiac title that is equivalent to fee simple. So if you can imagine that fee simple is the highest estate you could get in land, whatever that estate could do, we could do with respect to our form of title on 16,000 square miles of land in the Yukon. So that, I consider that a success as well. And we have also included all of our citizens, as long as you can trace your ancestry back to, in my case, Champagne-Ajac First Nations, or indeed any of the First Nations from the Yukon, you would be accepted. So that was a common criteria. It didn't matter if you were status or non-status, as long as you could trace your ancestry back, you would be accepted. That I considered to be another success as well. And we also, in terms of the constitutional diversity of land retention, we retained 9124 lands, Indian reserve lands. So if you look at, for example, the Teslin-Tlingit Council Agreement on Self-Government, they had 3 reserves, which are recognized as 9124 reserves. The only difference is that the Indian Act no longer applies. It's their agreement on self-government that applies to them. So that, I think, equally is a success. And on the opposite scale, as I mentioned, the majority of our land, though, is retained through our title, which is equivalent to fee simple. We do have some fee simple lands, of course, as well, simply because those lands had been extinguished or sold to other third parties, but we did pick up some of those lands as well as a function of the treaty. So a success being that we had a constitutional diversity of land. We just didn't have one type of land like fee simple. We also developed a number of common institutions like land use planning. We had a land use planning commission established simply because, based upon our experience, all of the land development that had occurred in the Yukon had occurred in a very haphazard, unplanned fashion. And so we thought it would make sense to ensure that we had a consistent land use plan and that we would participate on land use planning throughout our territory, not only on the lands that we own, but throughout our territory as well. And we also developed a common development assessment process so that if there's a mine that's going to occur within our territory, either on our land or off our land, the assessment process would apply and we would participate in that assessment process. If it was on our land, on, for example, Category A land, in which we own the surface and the subsurface, they would require our consent to any developments that would occur in that respect. So that was some of the examples that we've got. On the side of on the agreements on self-government, I think some of the successes that we did share is that, one, we've got exclusive authority. There are 4 categories of lawmaking that we've retained. One is exclusive authority, and we have exclusive authority over matters that are internal to us, so that if we wanted to build our governments upon our clan systems, we certainly could do that as well. And we also had exclusive authority over all of the issues within the treaty itself, so that if we had exclusive rights to harvest within our territory, we could decide who would have the right to hunt amongst us, of course. And so that's the exclusive authority that we got. Plus, we also have the paramount concurrent jurisdiction over our citizens throughout the Yukon Territory. Now, what that basically means, of course, is that if we were to pass a law on childcare, that childcare law, if I'm from Champagne-Ajac, of which I am, my grandchildren would have to follow or comply with those standards or with those laws throughout the Yukon Territory, even if they did not reside on our treaty lands or within our traditional territory. So that was part of our success as well. And we also, on our treaty lands, on the 16,060 square miles of land, we have the paramount concurrent jurisdiction over all of our lands. So we manage them, we control them. It's our laws that would apply. One of the other successes is what I would term the administration of justice. We do have the paramount concurrent authority over that as well within our territories and indeed on our lands, so that we can establish our own courts to enforce our laws and to ensure compliance, of course, with our laws, and to correct offenders of our laws as well. So I think that was a success from a self-government perspective. And also, I think we adopted a number of financial transfer agreements. Under Section 36 of the Constitution Act 1982, you'll see that the provinces share in sort of the collective wealth of Canada. We copied or adopted that principle to achieve our agreements on financial transfers as well. So we currently have that in place, and one of the successes is that many of us have lost languages due to the impacts that occurred due to residential schools. And one of the success is that we now have engaged in picking up our languages, our cultures, and that is a great thing to see, especially for an old-timer like me. So in closing, I wanted to say that those are only some of examples, and those are certainly my subjective opinion, and I see that my time is up, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dave, Joe. So now I'm going to call upon President Eva Clayton to provide her remarks. Do you want to do it from here or
Thank you, Aluki. In listening to some of the comments about modern-day treaties, and I think about the historic treaties, and I think about all of the hardships, the challenges that our treaties, whether they're historic or modern-day treaties, we continue to face those challenges. But when we work together, we will see some successes, as we have seen in the past. And when we think about the various natures of the treaties that we have, many of them are similar and many are different, and each are applied to the specific regions where we reside. For the Niska Nation, we have lawmaking authority. We are looking at Niska Child and Family Services, where we will be taking over our children. And I think it's important. The plight of our children and our youth is very important. There are many issues that face our Indigenous populations, whether they're children or youth. Many have cried out for help. We have heard those cries. We have also been able to look at economic development. In the face of uncertain times, the Niska Nation will look at how we can overcome the challenges that we face, because we all must build our economies. After years of being left out, we are left with the crumbs. And I think as Indigenous people, we know what we have to do to rebuild our lands. And we know what we have to do in our specific regions, how we can handle economic development. And that has to happen. And we have to have that resilience of the leadership to work towards overcoming all of the uncertainty that we currently face. And it's through these uncertain times that we will build strength amongst ourselves to work towards economic prosperity. We have to. For the Nisga'a, we have a number of projects. And we want to bring prosperity not only to the Niska Nation, but to the north, to where we reside and the rest of Canada. We have to make sure that our treaty partners understand not only will our nations benefit, but our treaty partners and Canada will benefit from that economic prosperity. And it's through the hard work of the leadership that we have to build stronger relationships to get that economic prosperity and reconciliation going. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Eva Clayton. Now I'm going to call upon President Jeremy Tungaru.
Thank you very much, Aruki. I want to thank Aruki for her tireless efforts in advocating the rights of interests of not only Inuit, but all Indigenous people in Canada and around the world, and I can commit to continuing the hard work. I stand before you as a proud Inuk, raised by parents who taught me values of hard work, education, and self-sufficiency. Thank you. They showed me that meaningful work is more than just a paycheck. It gives people purpose, dignity, and the ability to provide for their families. As I look across over to the table of Nunavik Sivuniksivut, I'm very pleased to be standing in front of you. That is our future. Those people are our future leaders. My parents also taught me how to hunt, fish, and to know and respect the land and the water, and to never forget who we are as Inuit. I'm sure you all share the same sentiment to our forefathers and mothers whose inherit the right where once upon a time were not recognized. So here we are, celebrating and reflecting on that 50 years half a century. We have made some remarkable progress getting our rights recognized during this period, all based on purpose, wanting to live a dignity rooted in our cultures, our language, and to provide for our families. Nunavut Inuit signed our modern treaty, the Nunavut Agreement, in 1993. This was 32 years ago. And today, there are 26 modern treaties in Canada and more being negotiated. The federal government would not negotiate agreements that recognized our Indigenous rights and titles before 1973. The Niska played a big part in changing the federal position. They launched the Calder case dealing with the rights, which they went all the way to Supreme Court of Canada. Following this case, the Prime Minister, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, stated, you have more legal rights than I thought you had. The James Bay Crees and the Inuit of northern Quebec also played an important role. Faced with massive hydroelectric projects, they also went to court and brought the federal and provincial governments to the negotiating table. The James Bay and the Northern Quebec Agreement was negotiated in rapid time, less than 2 years. The government can move fast when there is something important at their stake. As I said, our agreement was signed in 1993, but our steps to negotiate it began back in 1970. It was in 1972 that we began discussions with the federal government that led to a very detailed study on maps of our land use. Some of our families were still living in traditional camps. These were published as 3 thick volumes and provided important basis for negotiations. One of the most difficult parts of our agreement to negotiate was Article 4, which provided the creation of Nunavut from the Northwest Territories. This was the last major issue to resolve, and we finally reached the agreement in 1992. So a new jurisdiction was created in Canada. Through our land claims negotiations, this was a remarkable accomplishment. Our agreement required an implementation plan, which was done as a contract. The federal government had been criticized severely for failure to fully implement its agreement. An implementation contract was therefore signed to cover the first 10 years of the implementation. But an independent review of our agreement in 1988 found uneven implementation. 49 out of 193 implementation tasks were found to be largely unmet. There were attempts to renegotiate the implementation contract after the initial 10-year period. We got absolutely nowhere. And former Judge Tom Berger was brought as a conciliator. He recommended increases in funding for our joint management boards, and this was done after delays. He also criticized the approach the government had taken to arbitration. In our agreement, arbitration required both parties to agree to the process, and the federal government always said no. Berger said that at least one case should be allowed to go to arbitration, and he was ignored. In Justice Berger's Conciliator's report, he wrote in part, "It is now 6 years on the creation of Nunavut. Nunavut today faces a moment of challenge and a moment of crisis. It is crisis in Inuit education and employment, a crisis magnified by the evident of global warming and Arctic challenges of Arctic sovereignty. The Nunavut Land Claims Agreement that led to the creation of Nunavut is by far the largest of the land claim settlements in modern land claims era. The territory is vast, covering 1/5 of Canada, extending from the 60th parallel to the waters off the northern coast of Ellesmere Island. If Nunavut were an independent country, it would be the 12th largest in our area of the world. Finally, in 2006, NTI launched a lawsuit that settled out of court in 2015. Under our out-of-court settlement, some interim measures were adopted with a 10-year implementation contract to begin in 2023. Our contract negotiations began late, but we have completed them. The contract only awaits a formal signature. We can then continue the implementation of our agreement as it should be. We have faced many difficulties and have overcome many of them. There have been beneficial changes in the federal positions, and we must build on these and move ahead. So where are we going? The treaties are not just about Indigenous rights. It's about people. It's about creating real opportunities for meaningful work, thriving communities, and the survival of all Indigenous languages and cultures for generations to come. It's about ensuring a future where Indigenous people are not just participating, but leaders in our own land. Legislation and policies affecting our lives must be shaped by us and not for us. For years, we have been advocating for our rights, and now we are at the time that we are taking our rightful lead. NTI is committed to working in a constructive, creative partnership with both governments of Canada and government of Nunavut, as well as the Inuit organizations across Inuit Nunangat. This means that Inuit must have direct control over our education system, our language policies, our economy, and our governance. Using the Nunavut Agreement as a basis, the floor achieving Inuit social, economic, and cultural well-being, we are working towards nourishing Inuit with dignity. Food insecurity is one of the most urgent crises we face. The cost of food in the north is sky high, and traditional harvesting is becoming harder and harder to sustain. Our people cannot thrive if they do not have access to food, and they need to be healthy and strong. Similar to our language, our food is a central part of our identity. It nourishes not just our bodies and minds, but our spirits. Through the renewed implementation contract, we strongly advocate for adequate resources to enable our hunters and trappers organizations to fulfill responsibilities outlined in the Nunavut Agreement and build their capacity to govern themselves. Under Article 23 and Article 24 of the Nunavut Agreement, a unique land claims provision among modern treaties is about meaningful work and economic empowerment for Inuit. Investing in pre-employment training and creating Inuit employment plans are not just a land claims responsibility. It is an opportunity for growth and development for both individuals and the governments and organizations. Inuit must have real jobs with real opportunities for real growth. We demand a higher Inuit employment in key industries like mining, fisheries, construction, and energy. And we demand to encourage the terms and conditions in how these sectors will operate in Nunavut. We will support Inuit entrepreneurs, helping them own and run businesses in our own communities. We will fight for the future where economic opportunities serve Inuit, not outsiders. When Inuit have meaningful work, we have stronger families, stronger communities, a stronger Nunavut, a stronger Canada, especially today with geopolitics are in tumultuous times. Education is the foundation of everything, but right now, our education system is failing Inuit. My mother, a long life educator, taught me the power of learning. She believed that education is the foundation of our future and carry that belief with me today. My wife followed the same path. She studied to become a teacher and is now an Inuktitut instructor with the Nunavut Arctic College, ensuring that Inuit studies can learn, Inuit students can learn in their own language. Education is the foundation of everything, but right now our education is not equipped to help Inuit. My children studied Inuktitut for as long as they can, but too many students don't have that option, and we must fix this. Inuktitut must be the language of instruction for early childhood to grade 12. We must train more Inuit to become teachers, educators, and leaders, so our schools are led by our people in our language. We must create a stronger training program to prepare Inuit, not just for jobs, but for leadership. Our education system must serve Inuit needs, not colonial practices. When Inuit control our education, we control our future. That is why forums such as the Land Claims Agreement Coalition and the events like the Land Claims Coalition Conference are so important. They bring together leaders, innovators, and business owners who are working to create opportunities for Indigenous people. They allow us to build partnerships, share knowledge, and develop new solutions to challenges we face. It is about taking control of our future, shaping our economy, strengthening our languages, and ensuring our children have the opportunity they deserve. Together, through unity, we can build a future every Indigenous child has access to quality education rooted in our cultures and languages, adequate housing and infrastructure, and meaningful work. This is the vision of Nunavut, the vision of self-determination. Kuinami. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, President Tongaruk, and I want to take the moment to thank every speaker for your contributions to this plenary. In addition, I want to thank OKT Law for sponsoring this session. Like me, as participants, you probably have a deeper understanding of what it means to have a modern treaty, some of the challenges, some of the successes, and what is to take place for the way forward for future generations. Speaking about future generations, I'm really looking forward to the session, the plenary 2 at 10:30. It will be starting promptly at 10:30. As I was listening to the speakers, I have a deep belief that words are important. And I was thrilled to hear words, some of my favorite words, like thrive and prosperity. And so I'm hoping we will think a little bit more deeply about that. Right now, we have a break. I want to thank Aldridge and Roslyn for sponsoring this break. We will have a break, and we will also have the opportunity to do some networking. And I was talking about how words are so important, and I could feel my body getting ready for a break, because all I kept going back to, my mind kept going back to Chief Louis Natawapio's comments about caribou. And I kept thinking about, and I hope you can conjure this image in your mind, about the delicious caribou tongue I ate before I got on the plane to come down here. I don't think there's any caribou tongue out there, but please enjoy the break and the refreshments. See you promptly at 10:30.